Hey guys, we are here at Capernaum Studios and we're on the set of the Apocalypse Experience that's coming up really soon. I've got Zach Keppel. He is on our staff at Capernaum Studios and he's the production designer for the Apocalypse. So we wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about this really cool set that you will see as you go through the Apocalypse Experience. Go ahead.
Yeah, I always like it when Tammy comes to the table with a new idea or a new vision. And this year, again, it's a chance to research and learn. And it's amazing that 5 years ago, you wanted to show the Holocaust and what happened with the Jews. And, here we are, we're expanding the scene this year to actually include some of Hitler's teaching in the Hitler Youth Movement. And it's amazing with the talk of trying to get rid of history and tear down the statues and all of that. Mm-hmm. What we researched 5 years ago just on the concentration camps, you don't even see that information anymore.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me that schools, a lot of schools, are not even teaching about the Holocaust. So then the young people don't even know that this actually did exist, this actually did happen. So we want to preserve history so that we don't repeat the bad things that happened, which this definitely was. So show us some of these.
And if you have a chance to go to any of the Holocaust museums, if there's some in your local towns or if there's one traveling through, please go by and see those. And you're going to see a lot of this. One of Hitler's tools that they used through the science was eye colors. And so they come up and they had their own eye color chart. And
do I pass?
Well, blonde hair, maybe.
Well, let me see if you pass. Yeah, that bottom one, he might pass, but I don't know because there's some other criteria.
Right. They also would use the calibration tools, measuring the skulls, measuring the distance between the cranium and all of that. Those were factors that either you went to the concentration camp or you passed to go on to be a German Nazi soldier.
Yeah, it was terrible. So the scene and the Apocalypse Experience is about the national youth leader and how they would try to control the minds of the youth, get to the minds of the youth and indoctrinate them with the Nazi regime and ideals.
Right. One of the first things Hitler did was changed education. So, mathematics was actually using the trajectory of bullets, wind velocity. That way, if you knew it at an early age, when it became time to become a soldier, that was just second nature to you. You already knew the mathematics.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, this brings us to introducing our guests for the teaching. We've got 3 episodes of this teaching from WallBuilders. WallBuilders is with us. We're so excited. They came out to set, and we had Tim Barton and Jonathan, and they did a fantastic job. Y'all got to watch these teachings. So they're friends of ours. They are foremost in preserving history and teaching people all around this nation and the world what our history actually was.
Yeah, WallBuilders is one of the organizations that are true patriots. Mm-hmm. Just as I was saying, just in the 5 years of the apocalypse, that research that we did 5 years ago is already taken down. You can't find the testimonies and stuff. So WallBuilders are actually out there. They are collecting and preserving American history. And they're fighting in the government right now to keep education and keep that in the history books. So yes, check out WallBuilders.
Yes, wallbuilders.com. So I hope you enjoy the episode.
Hey, I'm Tim Barton from WallBuilders.
And I'm Jonathan.
And we're here in the Capernaum Studios as things are getting geared up for the Apocalypse Experience. And one of the scenes in this, I guess, kind of feature experience, riveting moments, kind of scary moments too, is there's a portion that talks about Hitler. And one of the things that we are seeing a lot in culture today is the use of the notion of Hitler or Nazis. And there's a lot of accusations that are being thrown around about maybe the current president is Hitler or different political leaders are Hitler. And these accusations, first of all, are a little demeaning to the knowledge of history and actually people that actually went through the Holocaust. To say that somebody now is a Hitler compared to then, it really represents a lot of lack of knowledge of history.
It stems from an ahistorical understanding of just not even understanding what happened back then in World War II, the steps leading up to it, and really the totality of the understanding. Like, I mean, for people my age and younger and millennials, a lot of them have never even heard of the Holocaust or really know the first thing about it and what the Nazis believed ideologically and what they did based on their philosophy and the way that they viewed the world. And so to really understand what's happening today and to understand that, these accusations that, the president is Adolf Hitler, to understand how just ridiculous that is, we need to go back to understand who is Hitler, what did he do, what did he believe, and what were the consequences of those actions.
Yeah, not to give too much historical context because nobody wants that big of a history lesson, but at the end of World War I, when there was so much fallenness and pain and there had been so much death because of World War I, Germany was very devastated and defeated, and Germany's actually having to pay a lot of other nations a lot of money, and they're really a broken nation at this point, which in the void of what was going on, it left this major room for a person like Hitler to step in, who says, hey, we can solve these problems, what's going on with the nation. And this is where some people want to compare Hitler to Trump, because Hitler came in and kind of said, let's make Germany great again. Now, his idea of how to do that, totally different than President Trump's, because when Hitler came in, he said that there are different classes and levels and groups of people, and he talked about the Aryans, who were the really good ones. And if you look through what he did in Germany and really what he did throughout a lot of Europe with the targeting of different people groups, certainly if you look historically, what he did to the Jews became fairly well known with the Holocaust, although as you mentioned, a lot of people today don't even know what happened, but there were roughly 20 groups that Hitler targeted. That the political dissidents, political opponents, people that politically disagreed with him, he would silence, he would put in prison. Some of them were executed, that the gypsies were targeted, professors were targeted, students that opposed him on college campuses. They shut down free speech. People weren't allowed to say they disagreed with Hitler anymore. You go through this list and included homosexuals. It finally gets down. Jews are what most people recognize because there were more than 6 million Jews that were targeted and executed during World War II by Hitler and his staff, the SS, the Nazis, all the people involved with that. But it really was a very big political movement to target people that they disagreed with, they didn't like, to silence them, to remove any kind of rights they had. And the depravity of what unfolded is really boggling even to consider today.
Yeah, and Hitler laid all of that out in his book, Mein Kampf. And so it wasn't at all a hidden agenda that he was going after. This is what he, really got in front of the country and shouted.
And this is an early printing.
This is a 1939. It's an English translation of it, because even though Hitler had published Mein Kampf back in the 20s, nobody really thought in the West and in America that Hitler was anything to worry about. They understood that he, represented bad ideas, but nobody really thought that they needed to pay much attention to Hitler. And so it wasn't until almost the beginning of World War II when Germany starts going on the offensive and starts really working out and taking action on Hitler's game plan that people said, wait a second, we've ignored this problem for so long. We thought that, this will never happen. This is not a big deal. And so now all of a sudden people are going in and starting to translate Mein Kampf so that America and England and the Western world can understand this terrible villain that has kind of risen up in their midst. So this is an early edition, and he lays out, that the Jews are, racially less than the Aryans, that they need to be exterminated, that they were the reason why Germany lost World War I, and they needed to get rid of them and exterminate them. And so that's exactly what the Germans started to do, because largely they were allowed to, because nobody really believed Hitler meant what he said.
Right. And one of the things, too, that's worth noting is when you look at Hitler, Hitler was very much a racist in a lot of regards. People think about his position on Jews and go, man, he was really racist for what he did there. Hitler targeted everybody that disagreed with him, and really it is more of what we see kind of in this extreme liberal notion that everybody fits in a group. And if you're not in my group, I oppose you, because Hitler opposed professors, Hitler opposed teachers and students, the gypsies, right, the homosexuals, the Jews. But ultimately for Hitler, if you weren't Aryan, you were less, no matter what group you fit in, because the Aryans were the best. And absolutely, it's a racist thing in the midst of culture today.
And he would even go and he would make people, if you're going to be a Nazi, you had to submit your genealogical records. You had to prove that you were not a Jew, descendant of a Jew. I mean, he would measure people's eyes. I mean, really go the full gamut to show you, like, all right, you are a part of our group or you're not a part of our group. And if you're not Aryan, absolutely get out of there. And he would target them, I mean, like the Jews.
We hear about racism in culture today, and sometimes, obviously, racism does exist because racism is a sin problem, and it's in the heart of individuals. I mean, Jesus said in the gospel that it's out of the heart of man that proceeds evil thoughts and wickedness. Racism is evil and wicked. That's out of the heart of man. And so this is not something that we can say it's delineated for a certain people group at a certain time historically. No, this is a sin problem that people deal with throughout the history of the world. There were people that were picking a group, and if you're not part of my group, I disagree with you. And even interesting, one of the things that sometimes people talk about is Hitler related to Christianity. Because, right, I mean, Hitler at one point, he said he was a Lutheran, and so he's a Christian. And so people even tried to associate what Hitler did with Christianity, which is really crazy.
Yeah, because it basically goes back to what you were just saying. If you were a Christian, that was by no means a cover for you, because if you actually believed in the Bible and stood for what that said, Hitler would target you, throw you in jail, and oftentimes kill you. In fact, I mean, there are many Christian martyrs who were slaughtered by Nazi occupation, Nazi ideas during the Second World War. I mean, probably the most famous of which would be Friedrich Bonhoeffer, who was a pastor thrown in jail. I mean, even worked to try to possibly assassinate Hitler if God gave him the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And praise God. And so Bonhoeffer throughout the war was constantly being thrown into prison, but never stepped back from defending his faith and defending what was right. And eventually, I mean, just a few weeks before the end of the war, the order finally comes down and they kill Bonhoeffer, and he becomes a martyr for his faith. But he was a very bold example of what living biblically in an unbiblical time could even require from you, and was a guy who I would highly suggest going and reading some of his works and his literature and learning more about his life, because he's such an outstanding example. But Hitler definitely was not Christian in the slightest in his thinking.
He didn't mind using Christians or churches as pawns in the game of what he was trying to accomplish, because he told many church leaders, hey, if you don't oppose me, then I won't oppose you. I'll let you exist. And there's a lot of really sad stories of at times when Jews would be on some of these train cars going to some of these death camps, that when Jews would recognize the train was going through a city, they'd start screaming in the city for help. Somebody help us, save us. And there were times when churches would be in church service as these trains are going through a city. And because they're hearing these screams, some of these Christians were getting convicted, and I don't know what to do. And so the pastor would say, again, some of these pastors were in allegiance with Hitler, saying, hey, if we don't oppose him, he won't oppose us. Let's everybody just get along.
They were like, oh, he's not actually going to do that. He's just being, over dramatic, over the top language. But once he took power, that's exactly what they did. And so they started forming these concentration camps, these prison camps, which then they were basically just shipping all the Jews that they could find in Germany and the conquered territories to these places to either work for them as slaves and really work them to death. And then they would start to exterminate them as the war started to turn against them. Yeah,
even today, if you go to Germany, if you go to Poland, there are still a lot of these death camps that have survived, these prison camps, slave camps that have survived. And they've intentionally preserved them so people can go and see what actually happened. What did this look like? One of the remarkable things about being in Germany, being in Poland, is on the way to some of these death camps or prison camps, these extermination camps, you will see actually train tracks going in, and really around the nation. There's train tracks everywhere, but all of them were leading largely to these extermination camps, death camps. And as World War II unfolded, and Hitler actually starts enacting some of this, where at first, He told the Jews, hey, for your own good, I need to move you away from other parts of the city where it could be dangerous, and I'm going to put you in these ghettos for your own protection. This is for your good that you're going to go in these ghettos. And he would seclude them. He would lock them off in isolation. And in the midst of this isolation, they had very terrible conditions. They weren't allowed to interact with people on the same level. Business was taken away from them. Their own private property was taken away. And in the midst of this, finally they said, well, okay, so the ghettos really aren't that good for you. So for your own good, and this is kind of where you see the notion of government, big brother, that for your good, I need to run and control your life for you. And initially, what Hitler was doing and what the SS and some of the Nazi leaders were saying was, we don't want to kill you. We want the best for you. And they would take them to some of these extermination camps. And on the way to the extermination camp, they would tell them that no, this isn't a death camp. This is something that is actually going to be this much better location for you to go and have a new life. You can start over, so bring your possessions with you. And when they would show up at these death camps, one of the things that very much in kind of the psychological warfare notion, when the Jews would get off these trains, what they would see is they would see people out planting gardens and growing flowers and fruit and vegetables. And they would tell the Jews, you're now at your new home. And the first thing we need to do is take you in and we're gonna let you shower and clean off. And so leave all your stuff, right? Leave all of your clothes and your shoes and leave all the luggage, all of your possession you brought, leave it here. We're going to go into these showers. And this was part of what they would do to exterminate them, because they would take them to these showers and then they would release this gas and different things in this room to kill the Jews as this is unfolding, right? So this is part of what happens during World War II. But as this is unfolding, there even is word coming out to America, because early on America was not involved in the war. And word is getting out to America that Hitler is actually doing some of the things he said he was going to do. He's actually doing that. And there were Jews that even came to America seeking refuge. And at the time, FDR, who was the president, said, look, we're not getting involved in this. There was a shipload of Jews who arrived in America seeking refuge. He turned that ship around and said, you're not allowed to unload here. We don't want to be a part of this. It was not long after that you have the bombing at Pearl Harbor. And I would argue this was a very providential thing where God gave America a chance to get involved and help save these people that Hitler was targeting and killing. And unfortunately, at the time, FDR didn't want any part of it. And I would, again, argue that I think Pearl Harbor was part of what awoke America to the fact that we have this real enemy going on in the world. We need to get involved. And America finally did get involved. But it took a little while for us to get involved. Once we got involved, certainly the direction, the course of the war shifted in some pretty significant ways, because America now was putting a lot of force into what was going on.
Absolutely. And so once Pearl Harbor happens, America is declared war upon by Japan, and then Germany hops in on that. And then basically there's 6 declarations of war over the next day or so. So now America is fully entrenched in the war, and we had been sending supplies to Great Britain and some of the other allied powers, but now our men are on the ground, and we actually target a Europe first type of strategy, right? Hitler is the big bad, so we need to go to Germany first, and then we can focus on the Japanese in the Pacific. And so as we help the English, we invade North Africa, which had been occupied by Germany. We conquer North Africa. We actually invade Italy, start pushing up the Italian countryside, and then it comes finally the big day where we're going to invade Europe proper, and that's D-Day. So June 6, 1944, America, England, Canada, the Allied powers come in. We land in Normandy, France, and start finally pushing back and liberating France and the other European countries that have been occupied by Hitler. During this time, as we start pushing into the mainland, we finally cross the Rhine River, get into Germany proper, we start coming across these concentration camps, these slave labor camps, and discovering and recording evidence, documenting all the atrocities that had happened. And in fact, Eisenhower, who was the general of the American forces, as soon as they start liberating these camps, they send in photographers and say, don't touch anything. We have to document what has happened because nobody will believe the atrocities that we are seeing here. And so we actually have, they took those photos and published them. This is actually before the end of the war. So this is April 1945, and it's in German because it is showing the German people exactly what they allowed to happen on their watch. And so it actually has, pictures,
very graphic
upon pictures, extremely graphic things that they're doing, because in these concentration camps, they would, what is the average? About 300 calories a day they were allowed. On max. And so oftentimes quite low.
If you got fed at all, you were not allowed to have more than 300 calories, because in many of these slave labor camps, the idea was they wanted to literally work you to death, because they didn't want these Jews to be around anyway. And as long as they're here, let's just get some labor from them. And if they die, that's kind of what we wanted anyway. So one of the things that's interesting about the pictures they took and the reports that are there from the people they actually rescued from these death camps, slave camps, Holocaust labor camps, is the weight of the average survivor of a male was 102 pounds for the average male. Now you think about America today, the 102 pounds is what you were in like 6th grade, right? It's not what you are as a grown adult. But this is what was taken to show exactly what was happening and what these people look like coming out of these slave camps. And at this point, the world is beginning to see part of what's going on is just on a totally different level than what people understood, the level of depravity and the level of brutality of what was going on. A lot of people thought humans don't actually treat other humans that way. And what we know, of course, is apart from knowing God and having that regenerated heart through Christ Jesus, that everybody's impacted by sin. And sin leads people to do some pretty awful, evil things. And that's part of the flesh. And that's why even the Apostle Paul said we should crucify the flesh and walk in the Spirit, because the flesh leads people to do very bad things. And one of the things that's also interesting is we have records of American soldiers who actually were there looking through the camp. And part of what they found is pretty interesting.
Yeah, so this right here is a letter that was written by an American soldier who was a military police officer. This is actually about the same time as that pamphlet that we just showed. And what's fascinating is he goes into these slave labor camps, and this is a eyewitness testimony of what exactly is going on. So he's writing back to his family in America, just describing the atrocities that was the result of this Nazi ideology. And he writes back to his family. He says, "I wrote you about the slave labor camp and said I didn't care to see anything like that again. But I heard yesterday morning that I missed part of it. So I went back yesterday afternoon and got my belly full. Went through what they called a laboratory, which was one of the worst things you could think of. They had a cross section of a man's head in a jar, and a head that had been shrunk to the size of my fist. First they boiled it in boiling water, then filled it with hot sand. The hair is still there and it's perfect. Then they have every part of the human body in glass jars. They would get slaves in with tattoos on their body and peel the skin from them and make lampshades from it. The pile of bodies had grown during the night. In one place they had a large trailer stacked full, and down by the hospital, or what they called a hospital, was a room stacked full as well." And he keeps on going, just describing. These are actually pictures from after the Americans had liberated some of these camps. And so you can see there's a lampshade made out of human skin. This is some lungs. Those are some shrunken heads. And so all of this is heavily documented things, but the German people had largely turned a blind eye towards the practices of the Nazis during the war, one out of intimidation, because if they said anything, they would get killed or sent to these camps as well. And another just because they couldn't bring themselves to believe that something like that was actually happening.
Right, and even today, a lot of people still question, could that really happen? Because that level of brutality, that level of barbarity, Americans have a hard time viewing that, because living under the Constitution and living under the freedom and the moral standards we've had in America for so long, that's so foreign to us, and yet this is the reality of part of what happened. Now, one of the cool things we have is part of the American forces who actually went in and were one of the liberating groups over in Germany and in part of this World War II endeavor. They picked up a Nazi flag. And what's interesting about this Nazi flag is on this flag, there was a reunion several years after the fact, and American troops from World War II got back together and they signed their names on this flag, men who had been part of this endeavor of what was going on from World War II. So this is one of the actual Nazi flags with signatures from American soldiers who had fought in the liberation effort of World War II. And as we look at this whole big picture today, again, it's worth noting when people talk about an American flippantly throw out this notion that some American politician is now like a Hitler. It just shows they really have no idea historically what they're talking about. And also the notion that maybe if in America we say that we should learn some positive things about American history, because there are a lot of positive things from American history, people argue, well, that means he's like Hitler because it's like Hitler's youth, and he wants to train them to think that only America's good, or like Hitler said, only Germany's good. This is that same notion, but the problem is, when you look at America, the fact that America was the nation that helped bring an end to World War II, that helped liberate these Jews who were still in these death camps or these Holocaust slave labor camps, the fact that America was a part of this means that America did some very good things. And it's worth knowing that even though America hasn't been a perfect nation, that America has done more to contribute to the freedom and stability of the rest of the world than arguably any other nation in the history of the world, even with all of our imperfections. And the notion that to say we should learn positive things about America means somebody's like Hitler means, again, you don't understand what Hitler was or what he did. and recognizing that Hitler took people that disagreed with him and said, we're going to imprison you, we are going to at times execute you or torture you, we're going to use you for human experiments, that Hitler wanted to silence free speech, that Hitler was burning books. If there was a book he didn't like or didn't agree with, we're going to burn those books. That's something that we are seeing happen some in culture, but it's something that we're not seeing being promoted from the current president, Donald Trump. It's something that we're actually seeing from people on different political extremes, which again is just not historically what we would see to associate with the current president, Donald Trump. So as we look at even what's going on at Capernaum, I absolutely encourage you, go check out what's there, experience part of what history maybe look like, and the reason as Christians we have to awaken to what's going on in America, that we have to be more fervent than ever to promote our faith, to encourage righteousness in others, because the depravity we've seen around the rest of the world, the reason we've had so much stability in America, the reason we haven't had the same level of issues in America has been because of the influence of Christianity in America. But the more that Christianity is diminished in America, the more we can expect the same kind of problems that we've seen in the rest of the world.